I think that when you're getting into business with someone, if you see that your partner maybe is talented and can do a lot of great things, but they're also kind of shady when it comes to money, or like they're just like very territorial when it comes to money and stuff, that's a red flag. I think that's another thing people like don't think about too. Like maybe you have been homies with someone for so long and you're like, hey, we should start a business. Oh yeah, great idea. Then when you start learning about them, you learn all these things that you didn't know because you were just friends, right? There's always an opportunity to pull the ripcord and be like, I'm out. Sometimes people feel like, oh, I'm on this linear path that goes one way. I can't stop my momentum of creating this partnership or working with this person. And if I say something, it's gonna like damage our relationship. Well, you could say something early on and maybe salvage the relationship. You can't say something down the line when something blows up, like money, for example. You want to be able to work with people that kind of align with you, different levels, not just like from an energetically, but also like I think like money. That's an important thing. If you feel like I think I'm gonna get jealous of this guy if he makes more money than me, if he brings in, so maybe you figure out a system that works out for you guys.
Welcome back, everybody, to the From Crisis to Justice podcast. I'm your host, Parag Amin, and I'm joined by my friend and special guest, Chuong Bui. He is a seasoned entertainment attorney and partner at Counsel for Creators based in Los Angeles, California. His practice includes entertainment and commercial transactions, copyright, trademark, and corporate law. Over his career, he has represented a wide range of creative clients, from filmmakers to musicians, to fine artists and book publishers, technology and startup, and serial entrepreneurs. So welcome, Chuong. Thank you so much for being on today.
Hey, Parag, thanks for having me.
So tell us, what made you get into the space as a counsel for creative artists?
Yeah, so when my partner Chris and I formed Council for Creators, we both come from creative backgrounds, me in music, him in design. And we realized that there wasn't really like a way for creatives, for artists to get legal help in a way that was accessible, right? Because legal fees are oftentimes, as you know, unpredictable and can be really high. And I think there is also a disconnect between artists getting like the business and legal information, and then also them feeling like they're compromising their artistic integrity in a way, right? Because there's, being an artist, being a creative, a lot of times what you do from a business standpoint is tied to you intrinsically to your creativity, and creativity is something that's very inherent. It's a very personal thing, right? So my point is, I think having to deal with the legal and business stuff can be a little bit overwhelming and also feel a little weird. So we wanted to create a law firm that could address all those pain points, right? Make things accessible, make things affordable, and also just to be able to speak the language of the artist and the creative. I think, and to understand their world goes a long way. So, us being creatives ourselves, we thought, what better way to do that, to honor like, this ethos than to create a law firm with that business model. So, and then, like from a personal interest standpoint, like I love all the things that my clients do. My clients are amazing. They make films, they do these massive murals and public installations, they write books, they do like they write cookbooks, they're chefs, they do like food influencer videos and stuff, so all these things are like eminently interesting to me and to everyone that works for us, I think, right? So it's honestly like awesome. Like I love it. Like it's such a cliche, but I love waking up and working just because of what I do and like the people that I support. So
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, you can hear it and see it the way you talk about it. I know firsthand how hard you work and how much you love this space. I know that we've had some clients together as well,
yeah,
and so
yeah.
tell me a little bit about the creative journey. Like I've heard two different things when it comes to artists. What's interesting is you have some artists that are very commercially successful, and sometimes for whatever reason, there's sometimes a stigma. Like there's like the artist is selling out, or they're becoming too commercial, and that there's something noble about being a starving artist. Do you have any thoughts on, one, where that comes from, and then two, just about that idea generally?
Yeah, so the notion that artists have to be starving or come from like traumatic backgrounds in order to channel that darkness to create, I think is a cliche. Because at the end of the day, you got bills to pay, man. You have bills to pay, you have families to support, you have a lifestyle to sustain, and maybe you have people working for you that you have to pay, right? So there is a romantic idea that yeah of the starving artist, but it's just not practical. So I think like how for us, like how do we kind of marry those two things in a way where the artist, because I think like what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that the artists can free themselves from a bandwidth standpoint. Like just today I was talking with one of my colleagues about the notion of decision fatigue, right? And how decision fatigue can seep into every aspect of your life so that it would prevent you from doing the things that you need to do, that you prioritize, right? So for us, it's like, okay, let's eliminate this stuff for you. You don't have to think about what kind of business you need to set up. You don't need to think about your contracts or anything like that. Don't worry about it. Delegate that to us or to someone else. Get an accountant. Don't do your own taxes. Don't worry about that stuff. So you can focus on what makes you great, which is being creative. And I think that can maybe overcome that sort of stigma of, oh well, I don't want to sell out or anything, because again, like as an artist, you are also a business, right? This is one of the first things I always tell my clients. You are a business in and of yourself, right? You are different than say Google or Apple in that those companies are not defined by one person's creativity. Well, I guess Apple a little bit with Steve Jobs back in the day, but even then, massive corporation, right? But artists, they are the engines of their own business, right? And like I said, they have so many things that they are responsible for: clients, employees, family members, whatever, their community, right? So you could you could frame it as being a sellout, or you could frame it as why you are this like very important nexus in so many different people's lives. Why would you consider yourself a sellout if you're supporting and helping out so many people in your community, right? So I don't know if that answered your question, but yeah, that's what
You
I thought of.
did, yes. Yeah, no, that's exactly it, is being able to provide value. And that really is, at the end of the day, what it comes down to. So let's talk a little bit about you and Chris and you guys providing all this tremendous value to your clients
Yeah.
in terms of you starting your own law firm, which is also a business. How did you know that that was the right move for you? Or did you know? Did you
Yeah.
just take a blind leap of faith, hoping that it would be the right move for you?
Well, first of all, I should tell the audience that you and we started our law firms at the same time. Do you remember that?
I
So
do.
we used Parag and I and a few of our other friends that had our own law firms. We used to meet for lunches every week or two, right? And we would just share best practices, kind of just have a space where we could like vent to each other and like support each other. And so I think that was one of the things that was very helpful for us starting out. And I think having maintained this relationship and friendship with you over the years has also been really valuable for us as business owners. So side note, but I wanted to bring that up. To answer your question, why how did we know? Man, I think I don't like working for people. I think I kind of chafe at authority, to be honest. I've worked corporate for most of my life prior to going to law school and after law school for a bit. And I just feel like, I could, there's a part of me, there's an ego to it. I think you know this, right? There has to be a bit of an ego where it's like, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to learn. I don't know everything, but I know enough, right? To do what I need to do. And so for me, I've always just been like, I feel like I know what kind of work life balance I want to establish for not just for myself, but for the people that work for me. I know what kind of culture I want for my business, right? I'm very clear on that culture. I am very process driven, so I know I can get processes down pretty well, automation, all that stuff. And I'm a people person, so I feel like I can work well with others as well. So how do I fold all that into being a lawyer? And I think when I met Chris, my business partner and friend, it was just really a stroke of luck because we were introduced through our mutual friend Vivek, who also started his own immigration practice at that time, and we found out that all of us were in the same attorney meditation group in LA. I think you were part of that group too for a while. Um,
That's right.
and then also we found out that we had all these similar interests. So I think there was a part of me at that time that was like, look, I feel like I can kind of do something, but there was also an understanding that I can't do it on my own. Like, props to you and everyone else who's a solo business owner. But for me, I just like having someone else there because you can kind of share the burden, share the risk, share the wins and losses, in a way. So when I met Chris, I was like, oh, this is perfect. His personality is the exact balance with mine, I think. And so all those things kind of coming into play, we just felt like, okay, this is a good time. This is a good time to do it. And like going back to your original question about who we are and what we do. Yeah, we shared values and shared ethos on like the kind of law firm experience we wanted for the kind of clients that we wanted to work with, right? So all that kind of like fell into place, and then again, like I said, like having a community of young entrepreneurial attorneys like yourself and some of our other friends was also really helpful around that time too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been over 10 years now, so
Crazy,
it's
crazy.
over a decade, an
Yeah.
incredible amount of time, and I've loved seeing you guys transition, transform, continue to grow your firm, and be successful. Let's talk a little bit about the partnership aspect of things because you're one of the few partnerships that has withstood the test of time and even distance, with Chris
Yeah.
now having moved to Croatia,
Yes.
and practicing law from there. So, can you talk a little bit about that? And has it been an intentional process? Meaning, have you had to sit down periodically or systematically to talk about what it is that you want out of this business? Did you formalize that partnership agreement, and how you've navigated any kind of disagreements, which surely you have had along this journey and path?
Great question. I love this question because I work with a lot of people that are like talking, they come to us and they'll say, hey, you think about forming a partnership, think about starting to work together with these people. What should I do? And I think like the most important thing you can do when you're about to work with someone is to have these really frank conversations about the most important things, right? Not just money, right? Not just money or responsibilities, but things like, hey, what do you believe in? Like, what are your values? What kind of clients do you want to work with, or what kind of people do you want to work with? Um, what is your goal? Where do you see us going 5, 10 years from now? How do we resolve disagreements? Do we flip a coin? What happens if I get burnt out? Like, will you be there to support me? Or what if one of us has a baby and we need to take time off? Like, do you believe in like do you believe in like maternity leave and paternity leave or things like that? Everything that's important to you, right? Because if you don't talk about any of this stuff, and I would say come to an agreement and ideally document it somewhere. Doesn't have to be a partnership agreement, could just be like an email bullet, right? Whatever, so that you have a reference point, right? If you don't do these things and let's say something comes up like, oh, I get, I got I got into like an accident and I can't work for 3 months, you know, you don't want to decide then what to do. You want to make sure you reference this thing that you had already discussed, right? So that's exactly what Chris and I did. We talked. He broached the subject of us working together, and then I think that's right around when I met you. And then we spent 6 months working on two matters together, right? We haven't started anything. We're just like, let's see what it's like to work together. So we kind of dipped our toe into like the working relationship. Concurrently, we had these conversations, right, about all these important things. So we did all of that before, and we arrived at really important things. Like I think one of the big breakthroughs for us was figuring out how do we deal with money, right? Like because of the traditional law firm model, this is okay. Maybe we get paid a base, and then if you bring in more work, you get paid for that. If you do the work, you get paid for that, right? So it's always like there's tiers to getting paid, right? And that works for a lot of people. I knew that would not work for me. I knew that would not work. He knew that would not work for him because there's a lot of stuff, that we do that is outside of fulfilling legal work. That's outside of like bringing in business, right? That's also valuable to the business. So we just decided, hey, you know what? Let's just do a 50-50 everything. Doesn't matter. You bring in more, I bring in more. Doesn't matter if you do more work or I do more work. We're always going to be doing something that's valuable to the business. Let's make it 50-50. Good thing we got to that point before we started working together, right? Because you and I'm sure you know, I do. So many lawyers who start law firms and they end up not working out. A lot of times comes down to money, you know. And we eliminated that pain point, and you eliminated everything else that could be a problem, and came to an agreement, and then we formed Council for Creators, right? So having these conversations up front, regardless of your profession, I know we're lawyers, but anything you do, if you are like, hey, I want to start an agency with someone, or hey, I want to like start making videos with someone, right? Like, and putting them on YouTube and TikTok and whatever. It's valuable to have these conversations up front, because you never know what's going to happen. You come into a working relationship with someone not expecting things to go bad. You expect things to go well, right? This is one way you can actually increase the likelihood of things going well by having these conversations, documenting them.
Completely agree with that. Let me ask you this. I mean, in terms of, one of the challenges I've seen in partnerships is what you've described, but it goes in the opposite direction. And what I mean is somebody's doing more work or somebody's bringing in more business, therefore they believe that they're entitled to more, or they perceive that the partner who's bringing in less business or is doing less work is therefore less valuable to the partnership. And so there's a strong aspect of trust based on the relationship that you've developed here of 50-50 and the other person's work ethic, that look, even if they're not bringing in as much business as I am, or billing as many hours as I am, or finishing as many projects as I am, that they're still creating sufficient value for the business that they're entitled to 50-50. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think we're talking about like the sort of like emotional and psychological aspects of having a partnership, right? Like, I think people are going to project whatever they have, and I think speaking as lawyers, we can be over analytical and to a fault. I think we can be aggressive to a fault sometimes, and sort of like yeah, those are things to be mindful of. I just knew, like, I can't speak for everyone, but for me and for Chris, that's just not how we roll. Like, we're both of us are our value is in building through community, right? And I think, like, again, we both knew that if we gave each other the sort of grace to do things that maybe don't bring in money right away but have value, and those things could actually really pay off really well for us. Chris, Chris, he's a brilliant writer, brilliant guy in general, but brilliant writer. And I think, like, for him, I want to be able to give him like space to be like, okay, you know what? I'm going to write all this content on Threads. I'm going to write these blog posts that I know are going to drive SEO for us down the line, for example, right? Drive organic traffic to our website. Yeah, maybe like he spends a week doing that and he's not working on legal work, but that's okay, because he's going to bring that his work is going to bring in a lot more stuff down the line. And I think, like, we were able to arrive at that trust pretty easily because we were just getting to know each other as people. And I think once we aligned from a value standpoint, I think it just made it a lot easier to trust each other. I think that when you're getting into business with someone, if you see that your partner maybe is talented and can do a lot of great things, but they're also kind of shady when it comes to money, or like they're just like very territorial when it comes to money and stuff, that's a red flag. I think that's another thing people like don't think about too. Like, maybe you have been homies with someone for so long and you're like, hey, we should start a business. Oh yeah, great idea. Then when you start learning about them, you learn all these things that you didn't know because you were just friends, right? There's always an opportunity to pull the ripcord and be like, I'm out. I don't think this is going to work out, right? There's always that opportunity. Sometimes people feel like, oh, I'm on this like this path, this linear path that goes one way, and it's like this, and like my moment, I can't stop my momentum of creating this partnership or working with this person. And if I say something, it's gonna like damage our relationship. Well, you could say something early on and maybe salvage the relationship. You can't say something down the line when something blows up, like money, for example. And I don't know if I'm answering your question, by the way, uh, yeah, I think like you want to be able to work with people that kind of align with you, different levels, not just like from an energetically, but also like I think like money. That's an important thing. If you feel like I think I'm gonna get jealous of this guy if he makes more money than me, if he brings in. So maybe you figure out a system that works out for you guys. You know, if that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. Yeah. And so, in terms of the hurdles and the various crises that come up in the entrepreneurial journey, what's the biggest entrepreneurial crisis that you guys have faced, and how did you navigate it?
Let's see. There's a few. I would, and I would say the one when you say crisis, I would say the pandemic in 2020. That was probably the biggest like out of our control crisis, right? And I think at that time that was what March. March is when did everything shut down? March,
March 2020 here in California.
April, May, June. Wow, tough 3 months. I think, right? Um, I feel like we navigated that by kind of just trusting in each other and having we just we were just able to be I'm very grateful that I had Chris because I would just be spiraling on my own uh, and thinking about things and then I would just give him a call or we'd meet up and I would feel better. I'd be like, okay, things are not as bad and I have someone I can like be open to and be vulnerable with. um, for us, our business, we are a transactional law firm that does a lot of things like setting up businesses for creatives, structuring those businesses, trademarks like brand protection, protecting intellectual property through copyright, and doing a lot of like deals, negotiation, drafting documents, drafting contracts, all the things that people in the beginning of the pandemic were like, I don't need to think about this right now, right? I'm freaked out, I don't know what's going to happen, there's so much uncertainty. So we're like, okay, you know what, a lot of these things that we sell are kind of like I would say like a higher tier price, right? And people aren't thinking about spending money right now on those things. People are like genuinely worried about all the financial and like health uncertainty. So why don't we focus on the thing that is the sort of the expression of our ethos, which is make legal accessible. So we have a subscription service. We've had a legal subscription service. I would dare say we're probably the first law firm to have a legal subscription service for creatives. Um, Ignore all the people out there who are saying they're the first. We were the first, 100%. You know this. Um, they we were like, okay, well, we have the subscription service. It's affordable. It's like a gym membership. You can join and quit anytime, and you can use it to just get legal advice. If you're worried about something, if you need a roadmap, if you need to talk strategy, if you need to get legal advice about something, at that time, there's a lot of questions about, I have a lease. How do I get out of my lease, right? Because I can't enter my building. I can't access my office because my landlord won't let me into the building because of the pandemic. I'm not an essential business. That's one of the things. Another thing is like, hey, my clients are canceling on me, like because they can't do their wedding anymore, right? Like, and I did all this work for them, and they owe me money, or whatever. What do I do? So we've shifted on two things. Let's help these people address these pain points with free content. So we started doing videos with each other. I think you did one of them, right, Parag? And then we would just post them, free videos where we're giving a lot of tips to deal with these specific pandemic related business issues. And then also pushing our subscription service as an affordable way to get legal advice. Because we all know, like, to get 10 minutes of your time, Parag, is already going to be hundreds of dollars, right? So um, for me too. But what if we just eliminate that pain point? You don't have to worry about paying me hourly. You just get advice on a month-to-month basis, right? And so yeah, I guess long story short, we focus on what people needed versus what we needed, I guess, if that makes sense. What people needed and how we're able to fulfill that need, given our like infrastructure, right? That's how we. I think that's how we pivoted, and a little bit, and it was very helpful, I think, because that was a crisis. I think that was not specific to our business. I mean, you dealt with it too. Everyone dealt with it at that time. I think for solo entrepreneurs, for business owners, small business owners, the pandemic was a crazy time for all of us. We weren't like, I think the big corporations, I think big companies like, I don't know, like Amazon, they could just sell a ton of toilet paper and they'd be fine, right? Because everyone wanted toilet paper at that time. We didn't have that luxury. We had to hustle. We had to pivot, right? I'm actually curious. I have a question for you. Like, how did you handle that, the pandemic?
Yeah, the pandemic was a tough time. I had made the decision to let people go home before California started shutting things down because we handle a lot of litigation. We
Yeah.
were still considered an essential business, so we could still keep going. But a lot of our cases at that time were contingency fee cases, and because courtrooms shut down, insurance companies tightened up their wallets, like they find any excuse to do, and they knew that our cases couldn't get out for trial.
Yeah.
So they started saying, "Well, look, we're not paying out right now. We don't know when courtrooms are going to open back up, and so you're just going to have to wait." And so I still kept everybody on. I felt like I wanted to take care of my team; they'd taken care of me, and so it was still bleeding out a lot of money every single month on losses, um, while revenue had slowed down dramatically. So it was a very difficult time. Frankly, one of the most difficult financial times I've had since starting my firm.
Hmm.
And I was at that moment of, hey, does it really make sense to potentially shut this firm down? And that was the first time and the only time I have seriously considered shutting down my firm was the pandemic. And it was one of the most painful, challenging situations. It was very tough. I mean, I had a young family.
Hmm.
And so I've got to be able to provide and take care of them. And so I could have gone back to big law and working there, but I had this dream of I want to make this thing work. And so I still very distinctly remember conversations with my wife pretty much on a daily basis about this. And the analogy I'd used is the phoenix, the mythical bird
Mm.
that grows. And the whole idea of the phoenix is it dies in its own ashes, it burns, and then is reborn, but it's reborn bigger and better and stronger. And that luckily is what we were able to do. So when we came through the pandemic, we came back stronger financially. We're able to hire more people, have expanded reach and growth. But it was all through sheer perseverance of just self-talk, positive self-talk on a daily basis, along with talking to my wife and some other close friends about how do we do this, and just keeping on the path to eventually come back towards profitability. And luckily, those insurance companies paid many times over when lawsuits started being set again or trial dates started being set again. And so we were able to capitalize on that, and that created a nice little cushion to be able to boost. But I will say part of what I learned from the pandemic was really the importance of economizing
Mm.
and watching your expenses very closely, which I think many of us, I mean, certainly me, um, weren't. I wasn't as careful necessarily about that when things are going well. You want to spend for that growth. You want to invest in the growth. But then when you're investing and the growth isn't coming, it really just feels like spending and spending. And so that's something I had to take a look at in terms of the overall expenses of like where I was spending funds, where I wasn't necessarily getting a return. So I had to take a look at that.
Yeah, that's a good one. I remember doing that too. I remember even like looking at all the even like something as simple as like software, all the software subscriptions that we had, because we use a lot of automation technology in our practice, and I was just like, why are we paying for this thing that we were like? I would find like two like a software platform that was like very duplicative of other platforms. There's I remember like finding opportunities to pay yearly versus monthly and saving 30% that way. um yeah, definitely taking a hard look at your expenses. That's a good point. Like, yeah, when things are good, you're just like, yeah, let's just keep this going, you know. Let's keep spending because it's working for us, right? But no, I 100% agree with you on that point. It's definitely something that we had to do too.
Yeah, and you know what? I will say that I am grateful for it looking backwards. Going
Mm.
through it, certainly one of the more painful
Yeah, man.
parts, and I think the most painful part of business as far as a lesson and getting through that. But having come through it, one of the best lessons that could have occurred. So I'm a firm believer in that if you find a way to take every problem or challenge and turn it into an opportunity, there's no stopping you and you can't lose. But it's just persevering through that and finding a way to turn those problems into opportunities
Mm.
and having the self-confidence to be able to do it, and to be able to withstand that pain to be able to do it. So
Yeah.
I would just use this as a quick opportunity to encourage anybody going through a tough time in their business or their life to try to find the opportunities wherever they might lie, because they're certainly there if you look for them hard enough and carefully enough, and you'll find them. And that may be the exact key that helps you get through and come through it stronger and better.
Yeah, well said. Well said. I think
So
like
let me ask you this: when it comes to creative clients, what's a legal tip you can give to them that is like a common misconception, but if they just knew this, it would save them either a bunch of money and or a bunch of headaches?
um when we think about a creative business owner, we think about four things that are important. We think about setting up your business in a way where the structure aligns with what you're trying to do. That's one. And I'll elaborate to answer your question. The second thing we think about is your brand, right? The brand is anything that connects you, your company, to your customers, right? How they recognize you through your brand. The third thing we think about is the things that you create and how to protect them, right? Whether they are artwork, illustrations, designs, music, films, whatever you make, you have to protect it because if you don't, you could potentially get exploited. Someone copies you, right? And on the flip side, if you protect it, you also have the opportunity to exploit it and leverage it to make more money, right? And then the fourth thing we think about is the relationships that you have, the working relationships, and how you protect and preserve those relationships. Oftentimes, those relationships can be preserved through contracts, right? So those are like the four things. We call them the four pillars, right? So I think you could pick anything from any of those four pillars, and you could say, okay, well, if you don't think like creatives often forget about this. One thing I will say that people forget to do, and it's really easy to do, is registering a copyright. So, copyright law is the area of law that protects the creations, the things that you create, right? Copyright law protects things like your manuscripts, text, literature, right? Films, choreography, dance, art, whatever, right? Um, so, what I see with a lot of creatives is they'll make something and then they'll start selling prints of it or something, right? Or they'll write something and then they'll start sending it to people to pitch, right? But they don't register the copyright, right? And here's the thing: if you don't, if you don't register a copyright for the thing that you've created and it's original, right? So you created something that's original and it's fixed somewhere, like on a napkin, even, or text or digital file, whatever. You've created something, it's original. You're about to do something with it, right? If you don't protect it by registering the copyright, you legally cannot sue someone for copyright infringement. You can't go after copycats. But more so, as a practical matter, you put something out there and then someone on Instagram takes it and then like copies it, right? You can't go to Instagram and say, "Hey, take this down because I own this," because they're going to say, "Well, prove it. Prove that you own this thing." You prove it by having the copyright certificate, right? So that's one thing that I see people do. They forget about it. They forget about registering the copyright. And sometimes people say, "Well, I created it. Don't I have copyrights in it already?" Like, yeah, it's sure you have by default. Once you create something and it's done, then copyright law confers copyright to you. However, you can't access the full suite of benefits and rights under copyright law unless you register it. Um, Sometimes people who are writers will say, "Oh, I registered it with the WGA. Doesn't that count?" It doesn't count, right? You have to register it with the Copyright Office. So that's one thing I would say. If you created something and you're trying to like sell it or exploit it or share it with someone else, you got to register the copyright. That's like number one thing.
Yeah, that's really good. So let's talk a little bit about the the legal aspects of protecting an idea, because I think there's a very common misconception about this. People say, well, no, that I had that idea first, that's really
Yeah.
my idea.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I've explained it is, look, the law doesn't really protect the idea, it's the execution of the idea. So it
Yeah.
doesn't matter
100%.
that you came up with some conceptual like idea of what this thing could be. It ultimately comes down to the expression of that idea. So that's on the one hand. But then can you talk a little bit about, I believe this falls into copyrights, but like, for example, show or game formats. So like, if somebody wants to create either a new show, whether it's like a television show or a YouTube show or like a game, and copying the idea of someone else in terms of the format. So
Mm-hmm.
what exactly is protected from that idea, and how does somebody then potentially create something that's similar without running afoul of copyright or other intellectual property protection laws?
Yeah, I mean, like you got it right. Like, intellectual property law exists to protect the execution of ideas, not the ideas in and of themselves. I have some thoughts on how you can protect an idea, though, that we can maybe talk about later. But to answer your question, for like a format, right? Like or game show, when you have an idea for a show, right? Usually, you express that idea into something like a treatment. A treatment is like a short script basically that kind of outlines everything that's important to the story or the idea of the format of the show or whatever, right? You can actually register a copyright for a treatment because it's considered literature. It's text, right? So let's say you punch down some ideas. Maybe you have like you describe like, oh yeah, so this game show it's gonna have these the structure. These are the rules. I'm gonna give names to certain aspects of the show, like the different events are gonna each one's gonna have a name. There's going to be like certain things that happen throughout the show that I'll assign like a concept and maybe a name or something. I'll describe it, right? You can write all this down. It, and once you write all it down, that's when it becomes something that's eligible for copyright protection because it is a complete, it doesn't have to be published, doesn't have to be out there, just has to be done and fixed in a, they say, tangible medium. That just means somewhere that you can access it, somewhere you can hold it or see it or whatever, right? So that would be text. Maybe you punch it up, you write it in Microsoft Word, you save it as a DOC file, and then you're like, okay, cool, I have this written down. Then you can register with a copyright. That's an easy way you can protect it. So you see, you travel a lot, so you've probably watched TV in other countries, right? You see the same show in different. You see Biggest Loser, or you see like Amazing Race, but you see it in different countries, versions of it. You see like Top Chef, or what's the big one? Not Master Chef, but the one with like the three chefs that they're competing
Iron
against.
Chef?
Iron Chef. You see Iron Chef in different countries, right? The reason why is because someone created the format and then they're licensing it out to different countries, right? So in my world, that is a powerful place to be. Once you create something, if you protect it and you set up the foundation, and not just copyright registration, but you set up the business, you set up the team, you set up everything, the infrastructure correctly, and you have a winner, dude, you're good. You're golden because then you can sell it to other people, other countries, and you make a fee, you make a royalty off of that, right? And none of that happens unless you have that copyright registration first. You start with securing your unassailable ownership and rights in that thing that you created.
So it's the show format rights that that stem from that copyright and that treatment. Is that how it works?
Yeah, or whatever, script, whatever it is, whatever you've secured, right? In addition to that, there's probably a trademark registration or two, right? Because you got to protect names and brands and stuff too that are associated with that thing as well. So it's all a very like I would say like strict. There's a strategic way of looking at it and setting things up, but if you're just starting with an idea, get that idea written down somewhere, right? Get it somewhere that you can actually like, so that you can actually register it. That's a great starting point. Some people will write different versions of that thing, right? And I'm going to wait until the final version. I'm going to get all this feedback and then I'll register it. Right? Well, you can register the original version and then you can just add all the different additions, right, that you've done as part of the copyright registration too, unless you materially change it, right? So there are ways to do it, but if you're planning on sharing your idea, if you're planning on trying to sell your idea, pitch your idea, get it written down somewhere. Get it fixed in some sort of medium where you can register the copyright, because that gives you that additional layer of protection. I will say this too. When you are in a position where you don't encounter this as much, but I do, like with my writers who are clients, they're constantly trying to pitch ideas. They're constantly trying to sell their ideas, right? You're going into a transaction where you're not going to have the leverage, right? They're going to have the leverage. The people that you're pitching to, they're the ones who are buying. They're the ones with money or the resources to do the thing. Why don't you put yourself at a better position from a leverage standpoint by protecting the thing before you go in, right?
Yes, vastly overlooked by many people.
Yeah.
And happens everywhere from Hollywood to Silicon Valley. Somebody goes in and pitches this idea, and they say, "Okay, thanks for the pitch," and then they go off and remake a very
Yeah.
similar idea.
Yeah. That actually brings me to the thing I wanted to bring up earlier. So, yes, you can't make these people sign NDAs, right? Because they would never sign an NDA. But what you can do, this is what I tell people, is you go into a meeting, you have a conversation, then you leave the meeting, right? Well, what's stopping you from summarizing the meeting over email? Be like, hey, it was great talking to you. Just so I understand, this is what we discussed, right? And looking forward to our next conversation, whatever. So now you have something documented. If there was any sort of promise that was made in that conversation, like, we will work with you if you do this or whatever, right? Something that was exchanged that is a little bit could lead to like potentially like a contract, right? Like a verbal contract. If you have it documented, you have like something you can reference, right? So I always tell people that even if they're not going to sign an NDA and you're sending them your life's work or whatever, the least you can do is these practical things to kind of like protect yourself little by little, incrementally.
Yeah, I love that. I think that the power of the recap email is something that's supremely overlooked. It's something I strongly recommend. I've done multiple videos on it. I talk to my clients about this all the time. Of just that one simple email, you don't necessarily need a formal written agreement for everything, especially when it comes to simpler things. But that email can do a whole lot in terms of protection and clarifying if something such as a dispute comes up later.
Yep.
Awesome, Chuong. So where can people find you if they want to find out more about you or your law firm or that subscription package you offer?
Oh man, so many places. You ready? So our website is counselforcreators.com. You could also, that's counsel, that's COUNSEL creators.com. You can also find us on all the social media platforms. We're very active on Instagram, very active on Threads at Counsel for Creators. We're on TikTok. Don't know how long that's going to last because apparently they have to sell the company. They might be banned in the US, but we are active on TikTok at Counsel for Creators. We're active on Twitter, formerly X, formerly known as Twitter. I believe it's at Creators Council. I think we're going to move to Blue Sky at some point, but you got to talk to Chris about that. Are you on Blue Sky yet?
I am not.
Yeah. So we'll probably move there. And then join our mailing list. We send a newsletter every week. We also post interesting articles from the world of arts, creative, legal, business, whatever. We share articles that we write, content that we produce. Um, and then our subscription service, the Creators Legal Program, you can find it on our website, or you can go to creatorslegalprogram.com, creatorslegalprogram.com, and just email me, chung at counselforcreators.com. I think that's it. I think that's
Wow, that's
sufficient.
bold. Giving out your email to everybody.
My email's on my website. It's on, you can actually email me from my bio that you read earlier.
Email them. Okay. Chung's one of the few people who really is all about that. Is open for everybody emailing him. Okay, good.
Yeah. I mean, I
Chung,
might not
thank you
answer your email, but I'll probably route it to my assistant.
but it'll be there.
It will be there.
Man. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, brother.
To all the listeners, thank you all so much for tuning in. Hopefully you got a lot of value. Chung normally charges hundreds of dollars an hour, so hopefully these tips will save you much more than that and could save your business. And if you liked this material, please make sure you like and subscribe so that you know when the next episode is coming out, so I can continue bringing you more value with guests such as Chung and others. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.